The stars of the galaxy glittered like diamonds scattered across an endless velvet sky. Each light held the potential for a discovery, a story, a new world waiting to be explored. Among these stars, there was a small, humble ship, its hull patched with years of use, but its engine humming with an unyielding determination. The ship, called the Lyric Voyager, c. Inside the ship's cockpit, its pilot sat alone, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. Lyra Vantil, a seasoned space navigator, had spent her entire life in the stars. The blackness of space had always been her companion, the glowing celestial bodies her only audience. She was the best in her field. No one knew the constellations, the routes, or the hidden pockets of the galaxy better than Lyra. But today, it was a message of peace. A message that could end the war that had torn apart the galaxy for generations. A message that had to be delivered to the High Council of the Corran Federation, a powerful empire on the far side of the galaxy. The journey would take months, maybe longer, and Lyra knew the path would not be easy. But it was a task she could not refuse, for the stakes were higher than anything she had ever faced before. In the cabin behind her, a quiet figure sat in the corner, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes closed in quiet meditation. He was Elysian Rail, a musician from the war-torn planet of Seldrith. His long, dark hair cascaded down his shoulders, and his fingers were calloused from years of playing the musical instruments of his people. But Elysian was no ordinary musician. He was a conduit for emotions, a messenger of the soul. Through his music, he had the ability to bring peace, to heal wounds that no medicine could touch. Elysian had been chosen for this mission not only for his musical gifts but for his ability to speak to the hearts of others. The message he carried was not one of words, but of melody, a symphony that could touch the very essence of a person's being. Together, he and Lyra were the perfect combination. The navigator, with her unmatched skill in navigating the stars, and the musician, with his ability to communicate across cultures and species through the universal language of music. But as the ship sped through the quiet darkness of space, Lyra couldn't help but wonder if they would succeed. She had heard rumors, whispers of forces within the Federation that wanted to see the peace effort fail. They would stop at nothing to keep the war going, and Lyra knew that there were dangers ahead, dangerous factions, hostile planets, and unpredictable events that could derail their mission at any moment. Her thoughts were interrupted by Elysian's soft voice, breaking through the silence. "Are you thinking about the journey ahead?" he asked, his voice calm, yet filled with an undercurrent of concern. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, meeting his gaze. There was a quiet strength in his eyes, an understanding that went beyond words. She didn't have to say anything. Elysian could feel her uncertainty. "I am," she admitted, her fingers tapping lightly on the console. "But I know we must continue. For the sake of everyone." Elysian nodded, his lips curling into a faint smile. "We will. And together, we'll find our way." Lyra turned her attention back to the star map in front of her. The journey was long, but they had no choice but to keep moving forward. They were the galaxy's last hope. But as the Lyric Voyager continued its journey toward the heart of the Corran Federation, neither Lyra nor Elysian knew that the real test of their mission had yet to begin. And it would come from an unexpected source. The days passed by in a blur of hyperspace jumps, starlight, and endless stretches of void. Lyra and Elysian had settled into an unspoken rhythm, working in tandem like two halves of a whole. She piloted the ship with precision, navigating through asteroid fields and uncharted nebulae, while Elysian spent his hours in quiet solitude, composing the music that would carry their message. His melodies echoed softly throughout the ship, a gentle reassurance in the face of the vast and empty darkness surrounding them. Yet, despite their newfound partnership, an uneasy feeling gnawed at the back of Lyra's mind. There was something out there, something they couldn't see yet, but could sense. A faint tremor in the force of the galaxy. She had been through enough hostile space to know when something was wrong, even when there were no immediate signs. Her instincts were never wrong. One evening, As they passed through the outer rim of a dying star system, Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden warning light flashing across the console. Her hand shot to the controls, fingers dancing over them with practiced precision as the ship's sensors registered a series of unusual readings. "Elysian," she called out, her voice tight with urgency. "Something's wrong. There's a ship. No, several ships. Coming in fast." Elysian stood up, his calm demeanor instantly shifting to one of alertness. The musician had a unique ability to read the air around him, to sense subtle shifts in the atmosphere. And right now, the air was thick with tension. He moved toward the cockpit, his eyes scanning the sensors. "Can you identify them?" he asked, his voice low, filled with the quiet gravity of someone who understood what danger felt like. Lyra's eyes darted across the blinking console, her fingers flying over the navigation controls. "It's hard to say. The signals are too scrambled, but they're definitely not friendly. These ships aren't broadcasting any recognition codes." She activated the ship's defensive shields, the hum of energy vibrating through the hull. Lyra's heart raced as she pulled the ship into a sharp turn, trying to outmaneuver the unknown vessels. "What kind of ships are they?" Elysian pressed, his tone more intense now. "Pirates," Lyra muttered, her voice steely. "I've encountered them before, but these ships are different. They re-equipped with military-grade weaponry. Someone's made them stronger than the usual scum out here. How much time do we have?" "Not much," she said, her eyes scanning the dark void outside the window. Suddenly, the shapes of the ships materialized from the shadows. 3 sleek, dark vessels, their surfaces coated in the cold, matte black of stealth technology. They moved like predators closing in on their prey, gliding silently through space with terrifying precision. Lyra's fingers danced over the console as she adjusted the ship's speed and trajectory, aiming for a nearby asteroid field. The field was dense with large rocks, each one a potential obstacle or shield, depending on how she maneuvered the ship. Elysian stepped back into the cabin, his hand resting on the edge of the doorframe. He knew better than to ask questions right now. Lyra's focus was all that mattered. The navigator was a master of her craft, and if anyone could escape this ambush, it was her. "Hold on," Lyra warned, her voice a calm anchor amidst the storm of her thoughts. The Lyric Voyager shot forward, dodging and weaving between the asteroid rocks, using the celestial debris to block any incoming fire. Behind them, the pirates followed, their weapons crackling with energy as they fired in hot pursuit. Lyra gritted her teeth, her fingers moving faster than she thought possible as she punched in a series of commands to the ship's internal systems. The asteroid field grew denser, the ships following in her wake. They were closing in too quickly. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the ship, an explosion from the rear, followed by a screech of metal as one of the pirate vessels took a direct hit from a stray asteroid. The force of the blast rocked the Lyric Voyager, sending Lyra's body jerking forward in her seat. "Lyra," Elysian's voice broke through the chaos. He was at her side now, his concern etched deep into his features. "Are you okay?" Lyra nodded quickly, her eyes never leaving the controls. "We're fine. Just a hit to the shields. But we can't keep this up forever. We need a plan," Elysian said, his voice urgent. Lyra's mind raced. "We need to get out of here," she muttered. "The only way we'll make it is through the rift." "The rift?" Elysian asked, confusion flashing in his eyes. "But that's too dangerous?" Lyra finished for him. "Yes, but it's the only option we've got. The rift, a swirling, unpredictable region of space that few navigators dared to enter. It was a place where the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist, where gravity wells appeared without warning, and time itself seemed to stretch and compress. But it was also a place where no one would follow them. The pirate ships would hesitate, unwilling to risk their own lives in the unpredictable chaos of the rift. Lyra slammed her hand down on the console, initiating the jump sequence. "We're going in," she said, her voice filled with a fierce determination. Elysian didn't need to ask any more questions. He trusted her, and he knew that, despite the danger, This was the only chance they had. As the Lyric Voyager accelerated toward the edge of the rift, a new sense of urgency gripped them both. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The stars blurred into long streaks of light as the ship sped toward the rift, the dark expanse of space ahead seeming to twist and warp in a way that defied logic. Lyra's hands were steady on the controls, her eyes locked on the instruments, guiding the Lyric Voyager toward the swirling anomaly. She could feel the tension in the air, thick as the space around them seemed to distort, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Elysian stood silently beside her, watching the view ahead with a mixture of awe and wariness. He had heard stories about the rift, whispers among the galaxy's most seasoned explorers, warnings passed down by those who had dared to venture too close. Few returned. The ones who did spoke of strange phenomena, distorted time, impossible distances, and a creeping madness that could steal the mind. But there was no choice. The pirate ships were relentless, and the rift was their only hope of escape. "Hold tight," Lyra said softly, her voice laced with determination. "We're entering now." Without another word, she punched in the final set of coordinates, and the ship lurched violently as the hyperspace engines kicked in. The universe around them seemed to bend and stretch, the stars twisting into impossible shapes, their light flickering as though struggling to maintain their form. For a brief moment, everything went dark. Then, with a shudder, the ship emerged on the other side of the rift, and everything felt wrong. The cockpit windows were filled with a swirling, vibrant storm of color. Nebulae that didn't belong, stars that flickered in ways that seemed unnatural. The ship groaned as it fought against an invisible force, the controls slipping in and out of responsiveness. Lyra, Elysian's voice broke through the chaos, full of concern. "We've never been this far in before, have we?" "No," she replied, gritting her teeth as she fought to maintain control. "This is deeper than I've ever dared to go. But we're not turning back." The ship's hull rattled violently, as if the very fabric of space itself was trying to tear them apart. Lyra's hands gripped the controls so tightly her knuckles whitened. The instruments were going haywire, the data scrambling and flickering erratically. She had trained for this, but the rift had a mind of its own. Outside the window, the nebula twisted in on itself like an angry cloud of color, strange and beautiful, but so alien it sent a chill down Lyra's spine. Gravity wells pulsed and faded unpredictably, and the stars beyond the rift were so distant, they looked like faint pinpricks of light, barely hanging onto the fabric of reality. "This is madness," Elysian murmured, his voice low and reverent, as if they had entered a place far older than anything they had ever known. He leaned forward, looking out the window, trying to find something familiar. But there was nothing familiar here. "Lyra," Elysian said, his tone sharp with urgency. "Look, behind us." Lyra's eyes shot to the rear view. The pirate ships had followed them into the rift. Their sleek forms were barely visible in the disorienting swirl of colors, but Lyra could make out the shadowy shapes, closing in with deadly intent. "They're crazy if they think they can follow us in here," Lyra muttered, trying to push the Lyric Voyager further into the rift, hoping to lose the pirates in the chaos of the nebula. But the pirates weren't backing off. They had already committed to the chase, and their firepower was formidable. Lyra could see the flashes of their weapons as they fired sporadically, the blasts illuminating the strange storm outside. "We have to keep moving," she shouted, a sense of urgency creeping into her voice. "The rift is our only chance." Elysian turned toward her, his face pale but determined. "What do you need me to do?" For a brief moment, Lyra hesitated. She had to focus on piloting the ship, but the space around them was increasingly unpredictable. The rift was unstable, and the longer they stayed in it, the more dangerous it became. They needed to make it out before it tore them apart, or worse, trapped them in its endless chaos. "Just stay with me," Lyra said, her voice resolute. "If we're going to make it out of this alive, we need to move in harmony. The rift isn't something you can fight. It's something you have to navigate. Feel your way through." Elysian nodded without hesitation, stepping toward the back of the cockpit. He closed his eyes for a moment, as though tapping into some deeper part of himself. From behind her, the faint sound of a melody drifted through the air. Elysian's music, soft at first, a gentle hum that filled the space around them, mingling with the vibrations of the ship. Lyra's fingers tightened on the controls, trying to keep the ship steady as she allowed the music to wash over her. It was strange. His melodies had always been soothing, but now, in the middle of the rift, the sound seemed to pulse with an energy that was both calming and empowering. It was as though Elysian's music was syncing with the very rhythm of space itself, guiding the ship through the disorienting chaos of the anomaly. Lyra focused, feeling the ship respond to the music, each note a pulse of harmony that helped her navigate the rift's unpredictable twists. She guided the ship through narrow corridors of light, weaving in and out of gravity wells that threatened to pull them into their depths. Outside, the pirate ships faltered. They too were struggling to keep up in the rift, their weapons firing at random, hoping for a lucky hit. Lyra knew they wouldn't last long in this environment. Their ships weren't built for it, and their engines weren't strong enough to handle the erratic forces of the rift for long. But she couldn't afford to let them catch up. Elysian's melody grew stronger, the notes weaving in and out, a symphony that seemed to pulse with the very heartbeat of the galaxy. Lyra felt it deep in her bones, as if the music and the ship were one. They were no longer just passengers in this space, they were a part of it. "Keep going," Lyra whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the storm of colors and swirling nebulae outside. "We can make it through this." As the lyric Voyager sped deeper into the rift, the pirate ships began to fall behind. The chaotic waves of space were too much for them to handle. Slowly but surely, their pursuit began to falter, and Lyra dared to hope. But the rift was far from forgiving. Ahead, the storm intensified, a violent vortex pulling at the ship. Lyra had no choice but to push forward, trusting the music to guide her, trusting Elysian to help her find a way through. They weren't out of danger yet. The lyric Voyager surged through the rift, every second feeling like an eternity. The chaotic pull of the anomaly around them intensified with every passing moment, threatening to tear the ship apart. Lyra's grip tightened on the controls as the ship bucked and shuddered, its systems flickering erratically. Elysian's music swirled in the background, his fingers now pressing gently on the strings of his instrument, coaxing a new melody, a low, resonant tone that seemed to align with the pulse of the ship's engines. As the sound of his music filled the cabin, it became a lifeline, a tether that kept them anchored in the maelstrom. There was something about his notes now, something deeper than before, as though they were becoming part of the very fabric of the space around them, pulling them through the madness of the rift. "Hold on," Lyra called out, her voice strained as she tried to keep the ship's course steady. "We're almost there." Elysian's brow furrowed as he watched the swirling nebulae outside the window, his hands still playing in a gentle rhythm, adding to the symphony of their survival. The air around them felt electric, charged with something ancient, something unknowable. He had heard of such places before, places where space and time seemed to twist and collapse. But being here, in the heart of the rift, was like standing on the edge of reality itself. "Lyra," Elysian said, his voice cutting through the intense hum of the ship's engines. "I feel something. There's something ahead. Not just the rift. It's like we're being pulled toward it." Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed ahead, her brow furrowing as she concentrated on the instruments. "I know. Whatever it is, it's coming from the center of the rift. I can't explain it, but I feel it too." Her hands moved quickly, adjusting the ship's course once more, but no matter what she did, the ship was being inexorably drawn toward the source. She could feel the pressure building in the air around them, a strange force that pressed against the ship, pulling it toward an unseen point. Elysian stopped playing for a moment, a frown settling on his face. "This isn't like the rift I've heard about. It's different. Whatever's ahead, it's not just space. It's something else entirely." The ship jerked violently as another surge of energy pulled at them, a blast of force that rattled the hull. Lyra's eyes widened in alarm as the control panel blinked erratically. "The navigation systems are failing," she shouted. "I can't keep the ship on course. We have to pull out of here before it's too late." But it was already too late. The Lyric Voyager was spiraling now, pulled deeper into the core of the rift, and no amount of effort from Lyra could break free. The stars around them flickered and vanished, replaced by swirling, iridescent waves of color that seemed to pulse and shift with an almost living rhythm. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward as a blinding light enveloped them, brighter than anything Lyra had ever seen. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. The universe outside seemed to fold in on itself, distorting and twisting into strange shapes. There were no longer any clear distinctions between stars, planets, or space itself. Everything merged into a single, overwhelming light. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded. The ship was still moving, but the world around them had changed. The rift had opened up into a new realm, one far beyond anything Lyra and Elysian had ever encountered. In front of them, a vast city loomed. It was enormous, its architecture unlike anything Lyra had seen before. Structures that defied all known principles of physics and engineering, floating in mid-air, suspended by unseen forces. It was a city of impossible beauty, with towers that twisted into spirals, bridges made of light, and pathways that seemed to shimmer and shift. The colors of the city pulsed in time with the music still playing softly in the background, the resonance of Elysian's melody now blending seamlessly with the environment. Lyra's mouth went dry as she looked at the city. It felt ancient, like it had been here long before any of the galaxy's current civilizations had even begun to form. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and Lyra could feel it humming in her chest, vibrating through her very bones. "What is this place?" Elysian asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "This is not the rift. This is something else." Lyra swallowed, her thoughts racing. "I don't know, but I think it's where we were meant to go. The ship, it brought us here. We didn't choose this path. It chose us." The sound of Elysian's music seemed to shift in response to the city before them, the soft notes now filling the air with a sense of harmony, as though the very structures of the city were listening, responding to his playing. Lyra turned to him, confusion and awe mixing in her eyes. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "It's like the city is alive." Elysian nodded slowly, his eyes wide as he looked at the glowing spires and the shifting pathways of light. "It's not just alive," he murmured. "It's aware, and I think it knows we're here." The ship began to decelerate, its engines humming with the strange energy that had brought them here. Lyra's hand hovered over the controls, but she wasn't in control anymore. The ship seemed to have a life of its own, guiding them gently toward the heart of the city. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was calm, yet impossibly deep, as if it echoed through the very fabric of space itself. "Welcome, travelers." Lyra and Elysian froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The voice was not human, nor was it anything they had ever heard before. It was ancient. It felt like it had been waiting for them for a long, long time. "You have crossed the boundaries of the known universe. You stand on the threshold of something greater than you can imagine. The path before you is one of unimaginable power, but also one of great peril." The voice paused, as if considering them. "Why have you come?" Lyra's mouth went dry as she turned toward Elysian. What had they stumbled into? What was waiting for them in this strange city, deep within the rift? And what was the true purpose of their journey? Her eyes met Elysian's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Together, they had ventured this far, but they were standing at the very edge of reality itself now. Whatever answer they gave, whatever decision they made next, would change everything. The voice still echoed in the air, vibrating in the very core of their beings. It was impossible to ignore, as if the city itself was alive, watching them, waiting for their response. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine, the weight of the question pressing down on her. "Why have you come?" the voice repeated, its tone reverberating with an ancient, cosmic authority that sent ripples through the atmosphere of the ship. Lyra's fingers hovered over the controls, but for the first time in a long while, she had no idea how to respond. They had entered the rift to escape certain death at the hands of pirates, and now they had found themselves in the presence of something far beyond their understanding. She looked at Elysian, whose face was pale but set with quiet resolve. "We came to deliver a message," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in her chest. "A message of peace. We have to reach the High Council of the Koran Federation." The voice did not respond immediately, and for a long moment, silence hung in the air, thick and expectant. Lyra felt her heart race as she waited for the next words. She could sense the presence of something ancient and powerful around them, but she couldn't yet comprehend its full scope. Was this city part of something greater? Was it somehow connected to the Federation, to the very message they were trying to deliver? Finally, the voice spoke again, and this time, there was a distinct shift in its tone, a slight sadness, as though it had known the answer all along but had waited for them to understand. "The message you carry is not the one you think." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Elysian turned slowly to her. His expression mirrored hers: confusion, disbelief, and fear. The ship continued its slow descent toward the heart of the city, as if guided by an invisible hand, and Lyra had the unsettling feeling that they were no longer in control of their fate. "What do you mean?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The voice responded, its depth seeming to stretch across time itself. "You were chosen, not to deliver peace to the Federation, but to witness the unraveling of a greater truth. The message you carry is not one of words, but of revelation, a revelation that will shape the future of this galaxy and all others that exist within it. You must choose, now, whether to carry it forward, or leave it behind, forever." The ship slowed even further, drifting toward the central structure of the city. From the look of it, the building was not a typical structure. It was something far beyond the concept of architecture. It was a fusion of energy and matter, with ethereal tendrils of light weaving in and out of its shape, constantly shifting. It was almost as if the building itself were a living organism, breathing, pulsing with power. Elysian, too, felt the weight of the decision pressing upon them. The music he had played before, once gentle and comforting, now had a sharp edge to it, almost as if it were urging them forward into the unknown. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration of his melody reverberating through the very walls of the ship, through his own body, and into the air of the strange city around them. "What revelation?" Elysian asked, his voice trembling slightly. "What truth are we supposed to witness? What does all of this mean?" The voice did not answer directly. Instead, a deep hum filled the air, a resonance that seemed to come from the very core of the city, as if the city itself were speaking to them. Then, the voice spoke once more, its tone shifting to one that carried a faint, unsettling finality. "The Nexus is a place of knowledge, a place where the boundaries between the dimensions of space, time, and reality are no longer fixed. Here, you will learn the true nature of your mission. What you believed was a message of peace was merely the beginning of a greater understanding, an understanding that will allow you to see the galaxy as it truly is. And once you know it, there is no turning back." The ship came to a stop just before the entrance of the central structure. The doors, if they could be called doors, shifted and pulsated as though they were made of liquid light, sliding open without a sound, revealing an impossibly vast chamber beyond. The chamber was filled with swirling energy, beams of pure light that curved through the air in impossible patterns. The center of the room held a massive, floating crystal, its surface reflecting countless dimensions at once, shimmering with colors that defied natural laws. The ship was drawn in, as if guided by the same unseen force that had led them to this moment. Once inside, the doors closed silently behind them, and the hum of energy filled the chamber, vibrating the very air they breathed. Lyra's mind spun. The Nexus, this place, this city, was beyond anything she could have imagined. She had been a navigator for years, had traveled farther and wider than most, but nothing had ever prepared her for the reality of what she was seeing now. The entire room felt alive, as though it were pulsing with an intelligence that existed far beyond her comprehension. Elysian stepped forward, his eyes wide as he gazed at the floating crystal. "This is the source," he said, his voice reverberating in the still air. "Isn't it? This is what they've been trying to protect, to hide." The crystal glowed brighter as if acknowledging his words. The energy in the room intensified, swirling around them like a gentle storm, and Lyra felt something deep within her, something primal, responding to its pull. "It is not the Federation that must receive the message," the voice echoed once again, this time sounding almost sorrowful. "It is the galaxy itself. It is time for all of existence to understand the truth of their reality. The Federation, the war, the divisions, they are all but distractions from the greater purpose." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What is the greater purpose?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. There was a long pause. Then the voice answered, not with words, but with an overwhelming vision. Suddenly, the space around them shifted, and they were no longer in the chamber. They stood on a barren planet, its surface scorched and lifeless, the remnants of a once thriving civilization scattered in the dust. In the distance, towering spires of blackened metal jutted into the sky, half buried in a sea of broken stone. The sky above was a deep red, swirling with clouds of ash and fire. The vision shifted again, and they were on another planet, this one lush and teeming with life, its oceans alive with vibrant coral reefs, its skies full of creatures that Lyra had never seen before. But this world, too, was dying, its ecosystems slowly suffocating under the weight of industrial progress. Then, the vision morphed once more. A fleet of ships, massive, imposing, was descending onto a peaceful planet. The people there, native to the world, raised their hands in an attempt to stop the invasion, but they were helpless against the overwhelming force. The ships began to deploy their forces, and the ground trembled beneath the weight of their arrival. The vision was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the echo of its truth. "The galaxy is divided," the voice said, its tone heavy with regret. "But this division is not merely political, it is the result of a deeper imbalance. A force that has long gone unchallenged. The message you carry, Elysian Rail, is not one of peace alone. It is a message of awakening. To heal this galaxy, to restore the balance, you must awaken the hearts of those who have forgotten the true nature of existence." Elysian took a slow, steadying breath as the weight of the vision settled over him, his mind racing. "How do we awaken them? How can we bring this truth to them?" The voice answered one final time, its words final and resolute. "The choice is yours. The message must be delivered, but who will carry it, and how, is for you to decide. You must choose whether to return to the galaxy you know, or stay, and become something greater." Lyra felt her heart beat faster. The weight of the decision was unbearable. What would they choose? Could they carry the truth of the galaxy's true nature, and live to tell it? The answer was hidden in the silence. And time was running out. The silence in the chamber was oppressive, stretching out like a vast emptiness, as though the very walls of the Nexus were waiting for their decision. The hum of the crystal seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beat of Lyra's heart. The vision they had just witnessed was burned into her mind, and the gravity of it was almost suffocating. She had always known the galaxy was fractured, divided, but to witness its raw truth, to see the destruction, the greed, the suffering, left her feeling like a thread stretched too thin, ready to snap. Elysian stood motionless beside her, his eyes far away, lost in thought. The weight of the voice's final words still hung between them, unspoken, but understood. This was no longer a simple mission to deliver a message of peace. It was something much greater, a call to action that would change the course of the galaxy forever. "Stay or go," Lyra murmured softly to herself, unable to tear her eyes from the crystal in front of them. The truth it held was undeniable, but it was also dangerous. Could they really carry such knowledge back to a galaxy that wasn't ready for it? Or were they meant to stay here, at the Nexus, to learn more, perhaps even to transcend what they had been? Elysian's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, soft but firm. Lyra, we can't just turn away from this. The galaxy needs us to know the truth. The Federation, the pirates, the Corans, none of them understand what's really at stake. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the quiet resolve in his eyes, a determination that wasn't there before. But how can we deliver this message? We barely understand it ourselves. How do we convince them? Elysian. What if it's too much for them to bear? Elysian shook his head slowly. Maybe they won't understand at first. But we have to try. If we don't, the cycle of destruction will just continue. The war will keep spreading. The lies, the division, it'll never end. The silence between them deepened again, but this time, it wasn't just filled with uncertainty. It was filled with something else. Something Lyra hadn't realized until that moment. A quiet and spoken bond between them. Through every peril they had faced, through every turn of fate, they had been in this together. And now, standing at the threshold of something far greater than either of them could have imagined, they were still in it together. Her fingers gripped the controls of the ship, though her heart still felt torn in two. The choice was theirs, hers and Elysian's. But the burden of the decision was so heavy, it seemed to pull the very air from her lungs. I don't know if we're strong enough to carry this, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the storm of her thoughts. Elysian stepped closer to her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His touch grounded her, anchoring her amidst the overwhelming uncertainty. We've already made it this far, he said. And we're not doing it alone. We have each other, Lyra. That's more than enough. His words were simple, but they resonated in her chest, like the first note of a melody that she hadn't known she needed to hear. He was right. They had faced death countless times. They had navigated the most dangerous corners of the galaxy. And now, at the heart of the Nexus, they were asked to do something even harder. To trust in themselves, in each other, and in the mission they had set out on. They weren't alone. Taking a deep breath, Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. All right, we deliver the message. Together. The crystal before them pulsed in response, its light intensifying, as though it had heard their decision. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, the very space vibrating with the force of what they had just agreed to do. Lyra glanced at Elysian, his face lit by the glow of the crystal, and she saw the same determination reflected in his eyes. The message will not be easy to carry, the voice from the Nexus warned once again, its tone heavy. The forces of the galaxy will resist, fight, and attempt to suppress it. The truth is a power that can break the chains of control, but it can also fracture the hearts of those who are not ready to hear it. You must be prepared for the consequences. Lyra's fingers tightened on the controls as the ship began to move once more, drawn forward by the force of the Nexus's influence. She turned to Elysian, who nodded, his gaze steady. They were committed now. There was no turning back. I'm ready, Elysian said, his voice unwavering. Let's bring the truth to them. The Nexus flared with energy, and the ship was pulled forward. As they moved deeper into the heart of the city, Lyra could feel the pull of the truth, like a weight on her chest, growing heavier with every step. But she was not afraid. Not anymore. The chamber around them began to distort, the shimmering walls flickering with light and shadow. The crystal before them surged, its light cascading outward in a wave that seemed to stretch across the entire galaxy. Lyra's mind raced as she realized what was happening. The message was not something they could carry physically. It was a force, a revelation, something that would resonate through the very fabric of space and time itself. For a moment, she felt a deep connection with Elysian, an understanding that transcended words. They were both part of something much larger than themselves, something that would shape the future of the galaxy. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They had no choice. The crystal's light intensified, and Lyra felt the energy surge through her, like a shockwave that rippled through her very soul. In that moment, she understood. The message was not just a call for peace, it was a call for awakening. to see the galaxy as it truly was, to tear away the veils of lies, greed, and division, and to face the truth of their shared existence. It would be painful. It would tear apart everything they thought they knew. But it was the only way. As the ship continued to drift forward, Lyra's mind was filled with a singular, undeniable truth. This was their destiny. And they would not let fear or doubt stand in their way. The Nexus had chosen them, and they would carry its message to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The ship's systems hummed with an intensity that matched the energy surging around them, the Nexus now glowing in a brilliance that defied any human description. The light of the crystal swelled, and the hum of its power filled the air, vibrating through Lyra and Elysian like the strings of a cosmic instrument. The truth was beginning to take form, spreading out from the Nexus and into the very fabric of the universe, rippling through the stars, reaching every corner of the galaxy. As the ship drifted closer to the heart of the city, the overwhelming light of the crystal enveloped them, and for a brief moment, Lyra felt her perception stretch, her consciousness expanding. Time and space seemed to blur, no longer tethered to the laws she had once known. She saw galaxies being born, entire civilizations rising and falling in the span of a heartbeat. The fractures in the galaxy, the endless cycles of war, greed, and power, all began to make sense, pieces of a puzzle far larger than anything she had ever imagined. And she understood. The message wasn't just about the galaxy. It was about all life, all beings, and their interconnectedness. It was about breaking the chains of division, of illusion, and awakening to the shared reality that bound them all together. It was about seeing the truth that had been hidden for eons, buried beneath layers of history, politics, and fear. The vision faded, and Lyra snapped back to herself, the sensation of being beyond time and space lingering like the aftershock of a powerful storm. She blinked, trying to refocus as the ship's hull continued to hum and pulse with the energy of the Nexus. Beside her, Elysian's eyes were wide, his expression one of quiet awe. He had felt it too. The weight of the revelation, the magnitude of what they were about to do. His hands were no longer touching the strings of his instrument. Instead, they were clasped together in a calm, meditative gesture. He was preparing himself, just as Lyra was, for the responsibility they were about to shoulder. The voice of the Nexus filled the space once more, its tone gentle yet carrying an unmistakable authority. You have seen the truth. You have felt the pulse of the galaxy. Now, you must carry this truth beyond these walls, into the heart of every being, every soul, that waits to awaken. It will not be easy. Many will resist. Some will fight to preserve the false divisions that have held them captive for so long. But there will be others. Others who will hear the call and rise to meet it. Lyra nodded, the weight of the words pressing into her chest. She felt the responsibility of it all, the immense challenge they were about to undertake. The galaxy was vast, its inhabitants innumerable. There were countless factions, each with their own beliefs, desires, and motives. And yet, Lyra knew deep within herself that the only way forward was to bring this message to everyone. She turned to Elysian, her gaze meeting his with a quiet understanding. The bond between them had deepened in ways neither of them could have predicted. What they were about to do, what they had already begun, would test their limits, their very identities. But no matter how impossible it seemed, they would face it together. Elysian gave her a faint, reassuring smile. We'll make them listen, even if it takes everything we have. Before she could respond, the ship shuddered again. Lyra's eyes flew to the control panel, and she saw that the Nexus had done something unexpected. It had activated the ship's propulsion system, but not in a way she understood. The ship was no longer just drifting. It was moving with a force far greater than any engine they had ever encountered. The ship's path was now set, and there was no turning back. It is time to awaken, the voice of the Nexus intoned, resonating through the very walls of the ship. Your journey is not only to deliver the message, it is to be the bridge between worlds. You will go to places where truth has been obscured, where hope has been lost. You will awaken those who have fallen asleep, those who have given in to fear, and guide them toward a future united in purpose. Lyra's heart swelled, and she turned to face the vastness outside the ship's windows. The stars glistened in the distance, stretching out into infinity. The ship was no longer simply traveling through space. It was a vessel of change, of awakening, a symbol of everything they had fought for and everything they would continue to fight for. Elysian began to play once more, his music rising to meet the call of the Nexus. His hands moved gracefully over his instrument, the strings vibrating with a resonance that seemed to echo across time itself. The melody was no longer soft and comforting. It was powerful, commanding, like a rallying cry that reached deep into the hearts of anyone who would listen. As the music swelled, Lyra felt the ship surge forward, faster now, through the depths of the galaxy, towards the first of many worlds that awaited the message. The stars blurred into streaks of light, and she could feel the energy of the Nexus, the energy of their shared purpose, pushing them onward. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. Elysian didn't miss a beat. "We start where it matters most. We start with the people who need to hear it. The ones who have the power to change things, even if they don't know it yet." Lyra nodded. The Federation, the Council, the leaders of the countless factions that had perpetuated the cycle of violence. She knew that it wouldn't be easy to reach them. Not with the entrenched power structures, the corruption, the divisions. But she also knew that they had no other choice. They had to start there. They had to reach the ones who could change everything. As they moved deeper into the galaxy, the music filled the ship once more, a steady rhythm that carried them toward their first destination. Lyra could feel the power of the Nexus pushing them, guiding them, like a current carrying a ship toward a distant shore. The journey was just beginning, and though the path ahead would be fraught with obstacles, Lyra felt a deep sense of certainty. The message was clear now, and the galaxy, no matter how divided, no matter how lost, was ready to hear it. They would face the unknown, but they would do it together. They would awaken the galaxy, and they would not stop until the truth had been heard.